Seeds grow based on the soil, based on the goodness of the soil. And when we think about it, if we think about it in like metaphorical terms, if our life is a garden, the soil is our mindset. And when we think about it that way, we learn that we must guard our minds. We must be protective of what we are consuming. We must be protective of what we are always turning in our mind, the thoughts that we're thinking, whether they come from an outside influence or whether they just come from ourselves. What thoughts are you keeping? What thoughts are you turning? So when we talk about the thoughts that are turning, think about this. When you have a thought of nervousness or a thought of excitement. Let's think about a pregnant mommy. When she has the thought of her unborn child coming into the earth, it can be thoughts of excitement and wondering if it's going to be a boy or girl, and the personalities of the child, the characteristics of the child. Will they favor more their father or their mother? So these are like thoughts that are turning in her mind. Now, the way that she thinks about it, the point of view that she has, that can be negative thoughts or that can turn into a positive thought. So just because we have these thoughts in our minds, we have got to control if they become negative or positive, because that is what is feeding the soil of our lives. So we've been talking about God has planted the seeds of assignment in our soil. But if the soil becomes contaminated with fear, comparison, cultural pressure, or other people's expectation, then our assignment can be contaminated as well. As our assignment may not grow as big as it's supposed to. Maybe the seeds of, the soil of contamination may stunt its growth because we stop growing because it doesn't look like what we think, or it doesn't look like the next person's assignment. Our assignment may be similar to someone else's, and because the process isn't the same, we may stunt the growth because of fear, because of comparison. And we have to always understand that our garden grows differently. The seeds are so different. They may look similar. You may be called, or your assignment may be to children, but what does that look like? Does that look like daycare workers? Does that look like teachers? Does that look like a therapist? Does it look like a pediatrician? So even though your assignment may be children, in what aspect is that? That may be an author of children's books. That may be a TV personality or a YouTube series. It looks different. The seed may seem similar, but the growth looks different. So therefore the nutrients look different. Therefore the thought processes must be different. Therefore we must protect those at all costs, because the thoughts, our mindset, how we look at things, how we view things, how we execute things, the posture that we take, the gratitude that we have, the anxiety that we have, the uncertainty that may turn into imposter syndrome, or that may turn into lack of confidence, or the certainty that may turn into a world of confidence that may be the driving force in all that we do. It depends on what we're feeding our mind, what we're feeding our soul. Y'all know we like a good scripture receipt. So in Romans 12:2, it says, "Don't copy the behaviors and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." So when God changes the way you think, when God starts nurturing the soil, when you put on the mindset of God, He is the one that will let you know the will for you. That means the process for you. So every God planted seed assignment has a different process, and that process depends on what God's will is, what God's plan is, you know? So, in the Bible, it says that we may make the plan, but God knows the ending. I'll find that for y'all. But it's like we may make plans, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the plans that is going to nourish us. We have to always look at the manufacturer, right? The one who created us, because He knows us better than we know ourselves. And he knows the seeds better than we know the seeds. So he knows what is good and what is not good for the seeds that we have. And everything doesn't have to be so detrimental. Everything that's not good for us doesn't have to be detrimental. It's just not right for us. So I may have a YouTube channel and you may have a TikTok account. And we may be talking about the same thing, but your platform on TikTok is greater than your platform on YouTube. And so you may flourish on TikTok. I may flourish on YouTube. It's not that anyone is wrong. But if God is leading you your platform somewhere else, don't try to build somewhere where God hasn't formed the foundation. Let's put it that way. Right? So if you're called to the marketplace in a way that you are career driven and you're supposed to have a 9 to 5, and that's where God has planted, that's the seeds of your assignment, don't try to go out and become an entrepreneur solely. Like, don't quit your 9 to 5 to become an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur or you can be a 9 to 5 and an entrepreneur. But if God has planted you in a corporation, be there. Nurture that. Don't go to work every day dreading it if that's where God has planted you. Go to work every day seeking out how you can be utilized in that place. So when we talk about God can plant similar seeds, that is true. And it's crazy because you can have the assignment or somebody else, like two people have a similar assignment, right? And depending on how they're feeding their soil depends on the growth of their seed. So if you don't have the belief system in place, if you don't have the right self-perception, if you don't have the right emotional health, the right influences in your life, that may trigger your fruit not to grow. But if you have those things, if you have the right belief system, if you have the right perspective, if you have the right influences, if you have the right mentors, those things will help your soil because it's feeding your soil good things. Some things quietly damage our soil of our mind. Constant comparison, we talked about that. That's a lot because we're looking at a lot of people's lives via social media. And a lot of it's not true. Some of it is true. And so when we always constantly compare, we can look at people for inspiration, but not for comparison. And then we have the social media pressure that we have to have perfect lives. And then you have the negative voices that always come. They always will come. Always. There will always be somebody out there with a negative voice. Someone always trying to talk you out of your assignment. Someone always trying to belittle your assignment. And they can do it in the most clever ways. That they just sprinkle a little poison in your soil. And it don't have to be a lot, but when we start churning the soil of our minds, when we start meditating on the little sprinkle of poison, then that thing starts growing. We are multipliers. So whatever we start thinking about, it multiplies. And so we always have to be that gardener that has a maintenance system in place. Like removing the weeds, replenishing nutrients. So if you have a negative thought, right, drown it out with positive thoughts. Make a list of gratitude, a gratitude list. Think of all the things that you have accomplished, that God has allowed you to grow into and to help others. Protect your ground. Protect those things. Go away from negative people. Don't spend a lot of time looking at the negativity online. Yes, things are going on in the world, but you don't have to be consumed with that. Be consumed with the word of God. Be consumed with what God is saying, not what the news is saying, not what's going on, because that can pour so much fear into our garden. And a lot of times fear will paralyze us. And so we're thinking about the many things that's going on that we have no control over. Let's be real. We don't have any control. We can prepare, but we don't have to be consumed by fear because what's going on, because that will paralyze us and to stop our assignments. Our assignments don't stop. Like we keep going no matter what's going on around us. And there's a lot going on around us, but we got to keep going. Guard what you're listening to. You may have to turn off social media for a while. You may have to reset your algorithm to like puppies and kittens, like just to clear out all the negativity. Guard what's defining your identity. Guard. Think about you're discovering yourself every day. Guard that discovery. Pick out that trash in your garden. Return to the Creator's perspective. What is God saying about me? What is God saying about my assignment? What is Scripture saying, right? So when we do that, then we can reflect. Who or what has been shaping the soil of my mind? You have control over that. We don't have a control over a lot of things, but you have control over your mind. You have control over your thoughts. And even sometimes stuff slip in, but the Bible tells us to capture those thoughts. Not saying that they won't ever come, but we capture them and we toss them. Okay? And so this is what is so great about our garden of life. We have a lot of control of the maintenance. We have a lot of control over the watering, the fertilization. We may not have control over the seasons. We may not have control over the growth because, roots come before fruits. We may not have control over a lot of things, but some things we do have control over. And so let us take that responsibility. Let us take that accountability and grow our life's gardens the way that God has intended. Okay? Remember, in a world full of chaos, always focus on the good. Until next time, toodles.